How do we know? How can I make sure that things in my life are covered? That I'm actually praying for things, all right? So here's some ideas about how to get organized in your prayer life. Let me just give you some practical ideas. Here's the first thing you can do. You can schedule them. Go ahead and schedule them. Put them into a calendar. Some things you're going to pray for daily. Some things you might pray for weekly or monthly. Some things you pray for seasonally. But put it on a calendar to remind yourself to pray for those things. Let me give you an example of some of these seasonal things. There could be a test or a trial or a hardship that either you're going through or some friend of yours is going through, that you know on such and such a date at such and such a time, my friend is going to go have this very difficult conversation, or they're going in for some kind of an operation, or something is happening. You put it on your calendar and say, for this season of time, I'm going to pray at that point. I'm going to schedule it so I don't forget. You know, we say all the time, oh, I'm going to be praying for you. I do that myself. I'm going to be praying for you. I've tried. I'm working at it. Instead of saying, okay, I'll be praying for you, it's just to stop and pray for him right then. So that way I wasn't lying. Okay? And I actually did what I said I was going to do. But I'll also put it on my calendar. Sometimes there might be a critical moment that has to be pressed through to accomplish a certain task. For example, maybe you're going on a peace trip. It's a 2-week-long trip. So for those 2 weeks, I'm going to put it on my calendar so that I don't forget that I'm going to pray for my friend who's on a peace trip. I got a friend, one of my dearest friends, a guy named Dave, and every quarter he goes to the Philippines to train pastors. So I put it on my calendar. For every day that he's gone, it's on my calendar. When I look at it in the morning, pray for Dave. He's in the Philippines, so I don't forget. It's simple. You just schedule these things. Sometimes there are things that are decisions with far-reaching implications. A job change. You're going to move away. Maybe there's a change coming in a relationship. And so you schedule these things out, but it's for a season. And once that season is over, well, then you may not need to pray for it at all. Or maybe it changes into just once a week or so. I pray for those things. So you can schedule these things. Another thing you can do is you can set up prayer memorials. That's what I call them. Set up prayer memorials. Let me give an example of what I'm talking about by that. These are physical things that will remind you to pray. My mentor that I was talking about a moment ago, who first explained this Aegis picture to me, I went to visit him. He's a great pastor up in the San Fernando Valley. And I went to spend a day with him just a couple years ago. And I was asking him about his prayer life. So he took me out in the front yard of his house. He lives in one of those ranch-style houses up in the San Fernando Valley. So it has a long front yard, kind of private. And he took me out in the front, and he goes, you see those 2 pine trees over there? That's Ken and Lauren, 2 of his best friends. Ken, is it Lauren? Lauren, right? Yeah, it's Ken and Lauren. I'm asking my wife. It's Ken and Lauren. He says, I come out and I go and I stand in front of those trees and I pray for my two best friends in ministry, Ken and Lauren. And then right underneath it was a bench. He said, this is Dean and Lori. And I pray for Dean and Lori when I come over to this bench. And then there were columns along the front of the yard with a fence running between them. And he says, so this column over here, this is the church. It's the church that he started. And this one right here, this is the university that he had started. And he starts naming what these different columns are. And then right in the center of everything was this beautiful fountain. He said, so the fountain, he said, that's Anna. That's his wife. He said, she's a fountain of life to me. So I see the fountain, I pray for Anna. And then he said, you see that little birch tree over there behind it? He said, that one's you. I come out in the yard and I come to the birch tree, I pray for you. They're little memorials, reminders of things. So I've begun doing that in my life. I mentioned a moment ago, I have a son-in-law who's a sheriff. I have another son-in-law who's a firefighter. So whenever I see a police car or a sheriff's car, I pray for my son-in-law, Micah. Whenever I see a fire truck, I pray for my son-in-law, Sean. And if I just hear a siren, but I don't see what it is, I pray for both of them. They're just little reminders. When I see it, I'm going to pray for them. There may not be anything going on in their life. I have no idea. But what's it going to hurt for me to take just a moment and to pray for Sean and for Micah? So I set up these little memorials. There's another one. There's a guy I went to school with since the 4th grade, and I had lost touch with him early in high school, reconnected about 4 years ago. And he actually goes to this church. His name is Eric. But what I noticed was on his Facebook postings for a while, it went on for, I don't know, a few months, that occasionally all he would post was 11:11. You're right, 11:11. And if you look at the time he posted it, it was 11:11. It was like he kept looking at the clock and saying 11, so he would just say it. He would just post it. I thought, well, I don't know what's going on in 11:11, but whenever I see 11:11, I'm going to pray for Eric. I got to tell you, it happens at least once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, that I just happen to look at the clock either on my laptop or my phone, whatever. It's 11:11. So I pray for Eric. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on in his life. I haven't told him, hey, send me your prayer request. I just pray for him. These are memorials. They help me organize things that are in the aegis, the realm or reach of my influence, of my authority, of protection, of the things that God has placed in my life. Here's another idea of how you can organize prayer. This is what I call drop-in visitors. Drop-in visitors. Here's what I mean by drop-in visitors. Drop-in visitors are the people who randomly, out of the blue, for no reason whatsoever, just pop into your mind. Ever happen to you? Someone comes to your mind. Well, I've decided that when that happens, I'm going to pray for those people. Again, what harm is it going to do? It may do something really wonderful. So when someone just pops into my head, I pray for them. And then I pull out my phone. If I've got them in my phone, I look up their number and I send them a text, and it's only 4 words. Every time it's the same thing, 4 words. Praying for you today. That's all I do. It's unbelievable, the responses I get from people. How did you know? I got to tell you what's going on. Thank you so much. And that's all I know. Just praying for you today. And those are drop-in visitors. I've just decided that it's no accident. If God knows that I like to pray and I want to talk to Him, that I care about people, well, then bring them on. Let Him bring random people into my head. It helps me organize and actually pray for these folks. Look at this verse from 1 Samuel 12. He says, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. It's interesting that it's not just sinning against you, but sinning against the Lord by failing to pray for you. If God has brought you friends, you have a sovereign obligation to pray for your friends. If He's put you in a family, you have a sovereign obligation to pray for your family. If you're in a business, if you're in school, wherever God has placed you, if He put you in a church or a ministry, you have an obligation to pray for that business, that school, that church, that ministry, wherever He's placed you, to pray for these things. He's given us that call to do these things. Now, I know this still can sound overwhelming. How am I supposed to pray for all of these people? I don't have time to pray for all these people. Well, who said you have to have a lot of time? You don't have to pray for all of them for an hour. Not at all. You can actually just mention a person's name in prayer. Paul did it all the time. The Apostle Paul. I'll just show you 3 verses. There are more. Just 3 verses in the Scripture. Look what Paul says he did. Ephesians 1:16. He says, I do not cease to give thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayers. 1 Thessalonians 1:2. We always thank God for all of you, mentioning you in our prayers. Philemon 1:4. He says, I always thank my God when I mention you in my prayers. He says it again, I believe it's Romans 1. He says, I just mention. It's not that you need to pray for 25 minutes for everybody that pops into your mind. But when they come into your mind, for example, for me, a drop-in visitor, let's say, or my friend Eric at 11:11, I'll just say, Lord, you know what's going on in Eric's life today. I pray that you will bless that man's life. Bless his family, watch over him. Whatever it is he needs, just take care of him. That's all. I'm not on my knees travailing in prayer for Eric. It's just a momentary prayer. But it gives me the opportunity to do what God is asking me to do. That He's put these people in my life, situations in my life that I pray for. Now, there are things that I pray for every day. My family I pray for every day. I pray for people on our staff, teams that I work with, by name every single day. But most of the time, it's just mentioning their name, unless I know of something that's going on, a project, a challenge of some kind, maybe a health crisis, then I might dig in a little bit. But I'm just mentioning it, but I'm praying for some every day. But there are others, as I said, that they're just seasonal, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be. So you put these things on your calendar, set an alarm, do whatever it takes to remind yourself to pray. So it takes a little thought up front to say, okay, who's in the aegis of my life? Who does God want me to pray for? Am I praying for my family? Am I praying for my wife and my kids, or my husband, or my, whatever, my folks? Am I praying for them? Am I praying for the people I work with? Am I praying for friends at school? Just to organize that a little bit and to bring them to mind, so that then you can mention it.